This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one leader, one country, or one ideology. This is about a system that fails quietly. So quietly that by the time you notice it, your options are already gone. Somewhere right now, money that existed yesterday does not exist today. Not stolen, not hacked, not lost to chaos. Simply unavailable. And when that happens, life does not explode. It constricts. Shelves don't look messy. They look empty. Banks don't panic. They go silent. You are told this is temporary. You are told to wait. You are told there is no cause for alarm. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Systems do not fail all at once. They fail in sequence. Predictable, repeatable, and when the sequence reaches a certain point, there is no policy, no speech, no rescue that reverses it. Stay with me, because what looks local right now is not, and the moment that proves it hasn't happened yet. If you want to understand what's actually breaking and why timing is everything, keep watching. What actually controls this system now is not ideology. It's not leadership. It's not even policy in the way we usually mean it. It's liquidity. Not wealth, not productivity, liquidity. Hard currency moving in and out of a closed system when a country can no longer earn enough outside money to pay for food, fuel, and medicine, everything else becomes theater. Speeches continue. Ministries meet. Budgets are announced. But the real decisions are being made somewhere else, inside foreign currency reserves, inside remittance channels, inside accounts most citizens never see. At that point, power shifts away from voters, away from parliaments, toward whoever controls access to dollars, euros, oil shipments, and transfer permissions. This is why focusing on personalities misses the point. The system is no longer governed by intent. It is governed by constraint. And once constraint takes over, every choice becomes narrower than the one before it. That narrowing is already visible. But to see it clearly, we have to look at what changed so slowly that almost no one noticed. There was a time when failure looked dramatic. A coup, a crash, a single moment you could point to and say that's when it broke. That's not how this works anymore. The most dangerous change is the one that feels manageable. At first, nothing is missing. Then one item is gone. Then another, you adjust. You substitute, you wait. Before, money worked everywhere. Now, it works only sometimes. Before, leaving was a choice. Now it's a calculation. Before, the system assumed tomorrow would function like today. Now, everyone quietly plans for interruption. This is the silent shift from confidence to contingency. People don't panic when change is gradual. They normalize it. They learn workarounds. They rely on family abroad. They tell themselves this is still life, just slightly harder. But slow change is not stability. It is deferred collapse, because each adaptation masks deterioration. Each workaround buys time while draining the core. And once a society crosses that invisible line, the moment when survival replaces expectation, everything that follows accelerates. The first visible shock is never the cause. It's the proof, and that proof is already forming. At some point, the abstraction disappears. It becomes concrete, physical, undeniable. An ATM screen goes red. A transfer that arrived every month doesn't, not delayed, not flagged, just declined. This is not a banking glitch. It is a policy move. We've seen this movie before. When hard currency runs low, governments don't announce collapse. They ration access. They freeze foreign accounts. They suspend remittances. They call it temporary. In Venezuela, this moment separated inconvenience from catastrophe. Families who survived on money sent from abroad lost their last buffer overnight. What followed wasn't chaos. It was velocity. People didn't protest first. They liquidated, they sold, they packed, they left. Because when outside money stops flowing in, the internal economy doesn't tighten. It empties. Right now, millions of people are staying put for one reason. Someone outside the system is still paying. If that link breaks, and history tells us it always breaks, the clock doesn't start ticking. It jumps. If you're still watching, you already know why this matters. And what comes next explains how this happens without anyone ever voting for it. What's happening here isn't mismanagement. It's mechanics. A closed economy survives only as long as outside money keeps entering it. Tourism, exports, subsidies, remittances. When those streams shrink, the system doesn't adapt. It reallocates damage. The state protects itself first. Foreign currency is pulled inward. Controls tighten. Exchange rates split into fiction and reality. Official prices stay low on paper. Real prices explode everywhere else. Those with access to hard currency keep functioning. Those without it absorb the shock. Not once, continuously. This is where the system reveals who it actually serves. Not workers, not consumers, but intermediaries, gatekeepers. Anyone positioned between dollars and permission. Corruption isn't an accident here. It's an incentive structure. Every restriction creates a toll. Every freeze creates a broker. Every shortage creates a shadow market. And the damage doesn't show up where you expect it. It shows up in exits, professionals leaving quietly, skills draining invisibly. The system doesn't collapse because people lose faith. It collapses because the people who can fix it leave first. And once that starts, the math turns brutal because the next shock doesn't move slowly. It arrives faster. Then the pace changes. Blackouts last longer, lines form earlier, hospitals ration, fuel disappears without explanation, not all at once, but close enough to feel it. Oil shipments fall, power drops for hours. Then for half a day, then unpredictably, businesses don't close loudly. They stop opening, elevators stall, refrigeration fails, medicine spoils. People don't argue ideology anymore. They count hours. They count calories. They count exits. At this stage, the system is no longer managing scarcity. Scarcity is managing the system. Every decision is reactive. Every fix creates a new failure. Electricity goes to one neighborhood by cutting another. Food arrives at one port by emptying another. This is where denial becomes dangerous. Because admitting the scale would trigger movement, and movement is what the system cannot afford. So the message stays calm, controlled, reassuring. But underneath, the constraints are tightening fast. When essential inputs fall below a certain threshold, recovery doesn't slow. It snaps. And when that snap happens, it doesn't announce itself with speeches. It announces itself with people leaving all at once. This is where it reaches you. Not as a headline, as a calculation. You start asking questions you never had to ask before. How long can I wait? How much can I send? What happens if it stops? If you're outside the system, you become an anchor. Your transfers keep lights on. Your money fills prescriptions. Your decisions determine whether someone else can stay. If you're inside it, your life becomes conditional. Conditional on approvals, conditional on coups, conditional on a signal you don't control. This is the human cost that never shows up in balance sheets. Families split across borders, professionals driving taxis, doctors choosing between leaving and abandoning patients. And the cruelest part is this: the system survives longer because of that sacrifice. Every dollar you send delays collapse and deepens the damage when it finally arrives. If you care about what happens next, don't look away now. This is the moment most people tune out, and it's the moment that decides who is ready and who is not. Because what follows doesn't stay personal. It spreads. What begins as a domestic failure doesn't remain one. It can't. Money moves, people move, risk moves. When a system like this destabilizes, the pressure doesn't dissipate. It relocates. Banks holding exposure tighten credit. Tourism reroutes overnight. Neighboring countries absorb costs they never budgeted for. Refugees don't arrive as a wave. They arrive as a constant. Schools stretch. Hospitals stretch, housing tightens, politics hardens. And because this movement feels gradual, it gets mislabeled as background noise until suddenly it isn't. This is how contagion works. Not through panic, through normalization. A default here becomes a balance sheet problem there. A blackout here becomes a fuel shortage there. A frozen transfer here becomes a border surge somewhere else. The system doesn't ask permission before it spreads. It follows the path of least resistance. And once it crosses enough borders, no single government can reverse it. They can only manage fragments. What makes this moment different is proximity, geographic, financial, temporal, because the next phase isn't theoretical anymore. It's forming at the edges. From here, the future splits, not into certainty, into paths. The first is adjustment, partial openings, selective reversals. Just enough access to hard currency to keep imports moving and exits slow. This path buys time. It does not restore what was lost. It stabilizes decline. The second path is erosion. Controls tighten, transfers shrink. Professionals keep leaving, but not all at once. The economy doesn't crash. It hollows. Year after year, the system functions, barely, until nothing resilient remains. And then there is rupture. This is the fast path. A reserve threshold crossed, a remittance freeze announced, a sudden restriction on movement. When that happens, behavior changes instantly, not gradually, instantly. People don't debate, they move, borders fill, boats launch, banks lock, external costs explode. None of these paths are chosen publicly. They are selected by constraint, by math, by how much time remains when the decision finally has to be made. Which one becomes real depends on a signal we haven't seen yet. But when it appears, there won't be discussion afterward. Only motion. There is a temptation at the end of stories like this to look for reassurance, for a stabilizing sentence, for a reason to believe the system corrects itself. This isn't that story. What matters now isn't belief, it's attention, because collapse doesn't announce itself with collapse language. It arrives disguised as management, as temporary measures, as reasonable controls, and by the time it becomes undeniable, the choices are gone. The danger isn't that this happens somewhere else. The danger is that it's already happening, quietly, and most people won't recognize the signal when it appears. But there is a signal, one moment that tells you the sequence has crossed the line. When outside money is cut off, when remittances freeze, when access, not value, becomes the problem. That's when time compresses. That's when preparation stops being optional. If you want to understand what comes after that signal, who absorbs the damage, who escapes it, and how systems quietly transfer risk from the unprepared to the ready, stay with this. This isn't the end of the story. It's the last moment before it accelerates. And the only real question left is not what will happen. It's whether you'll recognize it when it starts